What up, Trinity Youth? It's your boy Rico coming in with a virtual teaching. And I got a question for you. Have you ever had an embarrassing moment where you were so embarrassed that you felt like you just wanted to disappear? It was my senior year in high school. My friend Justin and I got a chance to go to a week-long camp where there were going to be all these students from the East Coast. And when we got there, we pretty quickly found a group of girls from Virginia who were so cute. And we naturally started crushing on them. And we spent most of the days trying to get them to notice us. Well, one night actually, all of camp got together for a big square dance. And Justin and I got actually paired up with this group of girls from Virginia. And not only that, but I was matched as my dancing partner with the girl in the group that I had the biggest crush on. Hashtag winning. Am I right? So anyway, we're dancing, we're having a good time. And if you've ever been to a square dance, it's not just kind of a free-for-all. It's actually pretty structured. There's a band doing the banjo thing, bang, ding, 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 ding. And there's an MC, and he's leading the square dance, shouting instructions so that everyone else can follow. It's kind of like the Cupid Shuffle. Anyway, so we're doing the dance, and it's really fun, and we're having a great time. And then there's an instruction that I hear, and it sounded like, grab your partner nose to nose. And I thought, oh my gosh, nose to nose, that's like way closer than I thought I'd be on our first date, right? And so anyway, I decided, hey, that's the instruction, I'm gonna go for it. So I went to the middle, and I stuck out my nose, waiting for her to stick her nose back out at me, go nose to nose, whatever that was gonna be like. And I kind of look, and I notice that she's not nose to nosing me at all. She's like back here going, what are you doing, dude? And everyone else is looking at me like, bro, what are you doing? And I realized then and there that I had totally misheard the instruction. It wasn't grab your partner and nose to nose. It was grab your partner and do-si-do. Oh my gosh, how embarrassing. Do-si-do is an actual move. Nose to nose, that's not a thing. Anyway, in that moment, I kind of blanked out. I got so upset. I got upset with the MC. I couldn't understand his Southern accent. I got mad at the institution of square dancing. I mean, who does this anyway? I got mad at the fact that we were at camp. Like, why did I even come to this thing? I started to kind of melt down, all because I was so embarrassed. And I was embarrassed because I was in a situation that was new for me. I had never been square dancing. I had never really interacted with people from Virginia. I had never been to a camp like this before. It was all new. And because it was all new, I made a mistake. I did something silly. And sometimes that happens. But you know, if you're like me, you have this really deep tendency to try to self-protect. And actually through life, we can avoid, we usually try to avoid situations like that where we know we'll be embarrassed or we might be embarrassed because we don't want that. And oftentimes those embarrassing moments happen like it did for me when you're in situations where you're with people who are different than you, cultures that are different than yours. And there's just a lot of differences. And sometimes those differences can equal potentially embarrassing moments. But here's the deal. The problem with that kind of living, that self-protective, avoiding those moments living, is that we can miss out on the richest community that God has intended for us. God created community to be a mix of beautiful differences. And we're going to talk about community in the next couple of weeks. But today we're going to talk about specifically embracing our differences. Because as we embrace our differences, we can actually start to experience community the way that God intended for us. And so we're going to look at a passage in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, verses 13 to 21. I'm going to read it. It's going to be on the screen right here. I'm using the Voice translation, so follow along with me. Jesus called together a select group of his followers and led them up onto a mountain. There he commissioned them, the 12. He wanted them to be with him. He sent them out to spread the good news and to cast out evil spirits. Here are the names of the original 12. Simon, whom Jesus called Peter, meaning the rock. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, whom Jesus called the sons of thunder. Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, the tax collector, who was also called Levi. Thomas, James, the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon of Canaan, who was also called the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who one day would betray Jesus to the authorities in Jerusalem so God's purpose could be fulfilled. In this scene, we see Jesus picking his crew, his team, the people that he would gather together to enact his mission on this earth. But, if we read the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we see that actually Jesus's crew wasn't just those 12. It was actually a wider group of people. In Luke 8, for example, we see a bunch of women mentioned as key members of Jesus's posse, of his group, of his team, of his community. Women like Mary Magdalene, who probably suffered from mental illnesses but was being healed. Susanna, Joanna, who came from a politically elite family. There was a whole mix of people that Jesus gathered around him to form this missional community. And as we read the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we can actually learn a lot about the different types of people that followed Jesus. And by learning about them, we can actually learn a lot about Jesus. And so I want to focus today on the passage that we read describing the 12 young men that Jesus chose. And I want to tell you a little bit about them. But as I do that, just as an aside, ask yourself, where do you see yourself in the mix? Who do you relate to? Or maybe there are a few that you kind of relate to. It's really interesting. So we had Simon and Andrew. Simon is also known as Peter. Simon, Peter, and Andrew. They were brothers. They were in the fishing business. And Simon was kind of an upfront leader type. We see him often speaking up first. And sometimes he would get into situations where he had to stick his foot in his mouth because he kind of just did something or said something without thinking. James and John were also brothers. They were fishermen as well, probably competitors of Simon and Andrew. And James and John were known as the sons of thunder, and they were known as hotheads or go-getters. We had Matthew, a.k.a. Levi. He was a tax collector, and we know about tax collectors that they were despised because they were seen as traitors. They were working for the man, and they were often seen as opportunistic and kind of out for number one. And then, of course, Judas Iscariot, known as the one who betrayed Jesus. But did you know that Judas Iscariot actually was in charge of the group's finances? That tells me that Judas Iscariot was seen as someone who was competent with money, and they entrusted that important task to him. But of course, we know that he got greedy and betrayed Jesus. Thomas, often known as Doubting Thomas, but I don't like to think of him that way. I like to think of Thomas as a critical thinker, someone who was not just going to do what the group did. He wasn't going to engage in groupthink, but he actually liked to be independent and kind of make his own decisions. I really like that about Thomas. And then Philip, Bartholomew, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus. We don't know much about them, but sometimes I like to think that that's by design. Maybe they were more introverted. Maybe they were just kind of more behind the scenes. And I just love the mix of personalities and skills and backgrounds that we see represented in the people that Jesus invited to follow him specifically. Again, men and women. But here's a question. Why do you think Jesus picked such a different mix of characters? I mean, maybe you might imagine Jesus's followers as like a peaceful, harmonious group, but actually we know that from the Gospels that there was a lot of kind of bickering and infighting, and they were always trying to outdo each other, and they didn't see things the same way. And you can understand that just seeing how different they were. And so my question is, why did he pick such a mix of characters? But you know what? We actually know the end of the story, right? We know that this group of people actually carried out Jesus's mission once he died and resurrected, right? And ascended to heaven. We know the end of the story, that actually this group of original believers, followers of Jesus, are kind of responsible for the worldwide church that we are a part of today at Trinity, right? And so here's my theory on how such a wide, crazy mix of people can actually come together in such an impactful way. I came across this quote, and I'll read it to you. Common memory must be created if a community is to ever be formed. Common memory must be created if a community is to ever be formed. I don't know if any of you are part of a team, but I'm sure you are in some ways, but you know that you need to come together as a team. And so This idea of a common memory is so important for any sort of group of people to come together and be productive and successful. They have to first agree on what brings them together. They have to be united. They have to have a common memory or a common thread. I mean, if a team doesn't do that, it's going to be chaos. It would be like the group of us coming together to bake a cake, but we each bring our own recipe and we follow our own recipe. Or it would be like all of us coming together to write a song, but we never really agree on which key to write the song in. It's just going to be noise. The result is a lot of effort with little impact. It's actually, the result's going to be a lot of effort with little impact and probably a lot of kind of infighting and conflict. These disciples of men and women, they were brought together by a common memory, a common thread, and that common memory was Jesus. They had all received belonging and forgiveness and purpose and love and acceptance from this man named Jesus. They all had heard the message of Jesus that said that they each had the image of God within them, that they were children of God, and that was their common memory or common thread, and that brought them together. They didn't stop being different, but they were brought together by this common memory. And that is so key. That is so key to community. And so here's my so what for today. Healthy community is found where differences abound. Healthy community is found where differences abound. Community, we don't have to stop being different, right, to be part of community. In fact, the more that we appreciate our common memory in Jesus as children of God with the image of God in us, the more we can appreciate that, the more freed up we are to really embrace each other's differences. It's okay if we're different. In fact, it's better than okay. It's to be celebrated. It's to be understood. It's to be worked through. And the more that we can appreciate individually and collectively our common memory in Jesus, that image of God, the more that we can celebrate and lift up each other's differences. And here's my so what for today. Find the image of God in those most different than you. Find the image of God in those most different than you. So how can you make it a habit to learn to look at people around you, people you know and you don't know, and see the image of God in them first? How can you learn to look at the people who drive you nuts, right? Maybe they're your enemies. How can you learn to see the image of God in them first, so that when you see them, you don't see what drives you nuts about them, but you see what's most true about them and what's most true about you, the image of God? What would it look like? How would that change your relationships? How would that change your sense of belonging? I mean, imagine walking into school and seeing the image of God all around you. Wouldn't that feel so safe and empowering? Imagine how, if you could learn to look at others that way, imagine how safe and attractive you would be to other people. Man, it would revolutionize the way that you walk through this earth. And so remember, when you find yourself in a situation where you're either avoiding people who are different than you, or you're in a situation where you're judging other people and other situations because it's different than what you're used to, remember, healthy community is found where differences abound. Remember that you can find the image of God in other people and in other cultures. And may that be true about us at Trinity Youth. May we learn, empowered through the Holy Spirit of Jesus, how to see the image of God all around us, starting with ourselves and out toward the world. I think we are going to be able to impact our communities in ways we've never dreamed of, the more that we can embrace that common memory of Jesus and embrace our differences. Have a great week, guys. Love you.